A really important part of the graduate scheme and the Big Four accounting firms is the accounting qualification that you have to do during the program. It's one of the main reasons why graduates find it appealing to join the Big Four in the first place. On the program as a graduate, you'll get all your training and exam costs paid for by the firm, and this can amount to a few £1,000s, so quite a significant amount. The accountancy qualification itself is very well respected, and it'll help you to develop the key technical skills required to progress in your career, whether at the same Big Four firm or in other roles in the finance industry. And given that you're watching this video, I'll assume that you already know that the exams are incredibly tough to pass. The two factors that make it even more challenging to do these exams at the Big Four in particular are the fact that they make you do these exams in a short time period, and also you need to balance working and studying at the same time when you're not in accountancy classes. In this video, I'm going to talk about my experience doing the accountancy qualification on the graduate program, and I'm going to share the tactics and the strategies that I use to make sure that I pass the exams first time, despite not having done accountancy at university. If you're doing the accountancy qualification yourself, I'm sure you can pick up a few ideas and implement them into your preparation. I did the CA qualification myself, which is offered by the ICAS accountancy body, but the advice that I share can be applied to other qualifications as well, such as the ACA or the ACCA. As I mentioned at the start, passing your exams is incredibly important because if you don't, there's a risk that you get kicked off the program. Performing well in these exams whilst having this pressure on your back is another element that makes this challenge even harder. So I'll start with my first week on the graduate program, which was the induction week. During the week, we were given plenty of information on the day-to-day operations of the firm and about what to expect during the program, of which a large part was on what to expect on the accountancy qualification. It was made clear from that very first week itself that there would be consequences if we didn't do well in the exams. The guidance given to us was that the firm expected you to pass the exams first time, and if you didn't, HR would always investigate the situation. I remember when I did the exams, the rules were that if you failed one exam and got lower than 40% in that exam, you'd automatically be removed from the program. If you failed 2 or more exams and got between 40 and 45% in all of them, you'd be shown the exit as well. Also, you only got one opportunity to reset the exam. If you fail this reset, you'd get kicked off the program. As you can imagine, when we got told this during the induction week, everyone, including me who joined the program, got incredibly nervous about the consequences of failing these exams. Everyone already knew that these were incredibly difficult exams anyway, but this added to the pressure big time. I'd moved to a new city to join the graduate program, and I remember thinking to myself that I hadn't even finished unpacking yet, and my firm was already talking about kicking me off the program if I failed my exams. I remember the people that were least nervous in the group were the people that had studied accounting at university. But I also know some people who had got complacent just because they'd studied accounting at university and they thought that they could breeze past the exams. Trust me when I say you can't breeze past the accountancy exams. There's several reasons why the Big Four have these strict rules when it comes to passing your exams first time. And one of these is that whether you can pass your exams first time is an indicator, at least to the firm, that you want to work hard and you want to build a career at that firm. The firms know that you need a lot of dedication to pass these exams and you need to be really driven to get through them. So after the induction week, we started with our accountancy classes and they were held at the unused lecture theatres at the local university. We were there for a month from 9 AM to 4 PM every day, and it was really tough going, to be honest, because of the amount of material that was covered in that short period of time. Because I hadn't studied accounting before, it took me a while to understand and get comfortable with the basic accounting concepts such as debits and credits. The big issue that I was having was that the tutors in the classroom just moved on from one topic to the next so quickly that I didn't really have time to grasp a particular area, as in the classroom they'd already moved on to the next one. I noticed that if I didn't go over the materials in the evenings and cement my understanding, the next day I'd find it difficult to keep pace with what was being discussed in the classroom, and that's because all the topics built on the previous ones. At the end of the first week, we even had an assessment under time conditions, which was really challenging. The time limit given was representative of how much time we'd get for the actual exam, and given the fact that most people hadn't got their heads around the first few topics, including me, we found it really time pressured. A large proportion of students didn't even answer all the questions in the assessment. These assessments were at regular intervals, roughly every 2 weeks after classes began, across all the different stages of the qualification. The results from these assessments were also reported back to your firm. If your performances were poor in these assessments, the firm would investigate why the performances were not up to the expected standard, and they'd give you support if that was required, or give you a dressing down if that was required as well. This is where I'd give my first piece of advice for anyone about to do the accountancy exams. The assessments are a great way for you to start preparing for the actual exam, and the reason for this is that you'll be doing them under time pressure similar to what you'll face in the actual exam, so you'll start to think and analyze information efficiently. Also, you get more question practice in, which allows you to work on your answer technique, which is really important when it comes to the accountancy exams. People in my year took two radically different approaches when it came to assessments. Some people just didn't put too much effort preparing for these assessments because they thought that they could ramp up the preparation closer to the exam, so they didn't want to put themselves under pressure for these assessments. And then there was the other camp, where I sat, who thought that by preparing hard for these assessments, that would elevate some of the pressure closer to the exam, at least in theory. I'd recommend that people prepare hard for these assessments, and that's because they can get slightly ahead of the game and they can start their serious revision early on in the cycle. Now, a couple of caveats to this point. Firstly, I'm not saying that the people in the first camp, the ones that weren't putting as much effort, weren't working hard. They were also spending a few hours every evening revising. The people in the second camp just studied longer every night. Also, preparing hard for these assessments does not guarantee that you do well and pass these assessments. I failed quite a few of these assessments during the process, despite preparing as hard as I could. Again, the reason why I was failing these was that there just wasn't enough time to understand all the concepts and get properly prepared for these assessments. A lot of the time I'd go into assessments knowing that I hadn't completely understood a particular topic or I hadn't covered certain sections of a topic. Saying all this about preparing hard for assessments, you need to keep in mind that the assessments are just practice for the real exam. That's what you'll be finally judged on. I saw quite a few individuals that failed all of their assessments but passed their final exam, which was all that was needed. I also heard about a few odd cases where people had passed all of their assessments but then failed the final exam. Another thing that I came across when doing the qualification was that my technique of learning and revising, which I'd used throughout university, was just not going to cut it when it came to the accountancy course. Like a lot of other people, at university I just used to write up notes from scratch on different topics and just repeat the process. I'd do a bit of exam question practice under time pressure, but it wasn't really a big part of my preparation. Right from the start of the qualification, we were told that there just wasn't enough time to write up detailed notes on different topics every evening, and the best way to go about learning the topics was through question practice. Now, initially, I ignored that advice because I thought there was no way that I could possibly answer any questions without having knowledge of a particular topic. It just didn't make any sense to me. I soon realized though that the tutors were right. There just wasn't enough time to write up detailed notes on each particular topic. At the end, I adopted a hybrid approach where I write high-level notes on a particular topic and focus on understanding and remembering the details through the practice questions. So after the first 4 weeks, we finally started to go to the office for the very first time. The exam was 8 weeks away at this stage, and that was always in the back of my mind. And that meant that almost every evening after work, I'd come back and do some revision. Now, this was fine if I left the office at 6 p.m. every evening, but inevitably there'd be a week or two where I was really busy and I'd have to stay in the office till 10 p.m. or after. And this is a common situation that people face across all the different stages of the accountancy qualification, from the start right to the end. You will face those weeks when you get little to no revision done in the evenings. Now, everyone, no matter what service line they work in, will have these weeks, and the key is really to ensure that this doesn't happen on a very regular basis. A week or two is fine, but any more than that and it'll start to seriously impact your performances in the assessments and, more importantly, in the final exam itself. To avoid this, the key really is communication as early as possible with your resourcing manager and your project lead. You need to make sure that they know that you've got your accountancy exams coming up, and so you need your evenings free to study. You need to inform them about when your assessments and your exams are, so that they've got that expectation in mind. So either they don't put you on projects which require the long nights, which is rare. More likely, they'll try and find cover for you during those weeks when you do need to revise. The firms are relatively good at this because they understand what's required to pass these accountancy exams, so they do sympathize with you. Plus, it doesn't really help them to lose their talented staff if you don't pass your exams. So those 8 weeks just flew by, where I was spending most of my evenings going through the materials and preparing for my exams. The next thing I knew, I was staring at my first actual exam paper, the first of many. So we did 5 exams over 2.5 days, which is really brutal. One in the morning and one in the afternoon over 2 consecutive days, a Monday and a Tuesday, and the final one on the Wednesday morning. The schedule for your exams might not be the same, but if it is, you just need to deal with the situation in the best way possible. In a perfect world, you want to get at least a day between each exam, but sometimes that luxury isn't afforded to you. You need to be able to focus for lengthy periods of time, and I definitely recommend having a practice day where you follow the same schedule. So that's an exam in the morning, followed by an hour break, and then another exam in the afternoon. Exam technique is really important when it comes to the accountancy exams, and there are many factors that you want to be aware of, but I'll go through two of the important ones here. One of these is that you need to break down the total time that you have to do the exam and allocate certain time to each question based on how many marks that question carries. The toughest part is really sticking to the time limit that you've given yourself. The reason for this is eventually when you're writing an answer, you're spending so much extra time trying to write the perfect answer, which is actually better spent just moving on to the next question. I saw a lot of people falling into this trap, including myself, where they missed out on one or two questions towards the end of the exam because they spent too much time trying to write the perfect answer for a question which was towards the start of the exam. Another thing to keep in mind is that when writing an answer, you might reach a stage where you don't remember a particular detail which you need to complete that answer. For example, you might be creating a P&L, but you forget what the corporate tax rate is for whatever reason. Instead of just giving up on your answer, you can just assume that the corporate tax rate is 10% and then complete your answer based on that assumption. Even though you won't pick up marks for applying the incorrect tax rate, you could pick up marks for any of the further analysis that you do. You should definitely look at examiners' reports from past exams and sample answers if there are any. They both give a good indication of what the most important components of a particular topic are, and the examiner's report points out what the most common mistakes are made by students so you can avoid making those. I managed to pass those 5 exams over the 2.5 days, and after that came a couple of more exams at the same stage of the qualification. After passing those, I moved on to what I'd heard was the most challenging stage of the qualification. On the ICAS qualification, this stage is called TPS, which stands for the Test of Professional Skills. This is where the subjects get really technical, and I'd heard that most of the people falter at this stage. After I got back into classes for this TPS stage, it didn't take me long to notice a jump up in difficulty. There are 4 exams in total at this stage: assurance, accounting, tax, and finance. Similar to the first stage, you spend a lot of time in the evenings and on the weekends studying. Another suggestion which I'd give to people doing these exams is to clarify any points that you don't understand with your tutors. They're there to help you out, so make sure you use them. I remember I was never shy to raise my hand in class and ask questions of the tutors, and I'd encourage you to do the same. When studying certain topics, especially in finance for me, I find it very useful to relate what I'd been studying to what I'd experienced at work. Being able to link the two helped me to understand how these theoretical concepts which I was learning in class translated into the real world on client projects. I know my friends in the audit and the tax service lines had the same experience when it came to those two subjects. For audit, I did hear that sometimes you had to be careful because the theory that you learned in class might not be the same as what happens in practice on the project. Clearly, just writing down what you did on your client project is not going to get you any marks if it doesn't match the theory which is taught in class. I did those 4 exams at the TPS stage and luckily managed to pass them all. Unlike the 7 exams I did in the first stage, I wasn't confident at all of passing these 4 exams. The passing rate is the lowest at the TPS stage, and it's quite common for people to fail at least one of the 4 exams. The final stage of the qualification was a large case study where we had to give the company strategic advice on what they should do given the circumstances that they were facing. A different revision strategy which I adopted for this final stage was that I started revising with friends from the same firm who were doing the exams with me. I'd never really revised in a group before, not even during university. It made sense to study in a group for this exam particularly because everyone in the group had different ideas and suggestions on how they would approach that particular case study. Discussing these approaches in a group, all of which were correct as long as they were justifiable, forced me to start seeing problems from different angles. Working in a group completely comes down to personal preference. If you've got a good group that challenges each other and keeps each other on track, it makes sense to study in that group, no matter what stage of the qualification you're in. I did my final exam in October 2017, and it was a couple of months away to find out the result of that exam. It was a great day when the results came out, and it was a culmination of 2 years of hard work and sacrifices being made. And that applies to everyone who's passed the exam. They've spent a lot of time revising and practicing exam questions. I hope you found this video useful, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions in the comments below. If you want to hear more about my experience on the graduate program at a Big 4 accounting firm, click on the video on your screen right now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.